Mason had been counting every penny of his gas station paycheck, barely making rent and living on instant noodles. On New Year's Eve, with just $50 to his name, he faced a choice that would define his humanity. A stranded family with 3 small children, shivered in the winter cold, their car's fuel tank empty, and all nearby banks closed. Without hesitation, Mason spent his last dollars helping these strangers get home safely. 3 days later, a black limousine pulled up to that same pump, carrying news that would transform Mason's life forever. Hi everyone, welcome to Mystic Tales. Today, I'm excited to share a new story with you. The winter wind howled through the empty streets of Minneapolis as Mason Thompson started his night shift at the corner stop gas station. The digital clock on the wall showed 8 p.m. on December 31st. Most people were already at their New Year's celebrations, but Mason couldn't afford such luxuries. He sat behind the counter, checking his worn leather wallet one more time. The single $50 bill inside was all he had left until his next paycheck, 5 days away. His rent was due soon, and his cupboard at home held only 2 packages of instant noodles. "Just get through this shift," Mason whispered to himself, rubbing his cold hands together. The heating in the small gas station store barely worked, and his blue uniform jacket wasn't thick enough for Minnesota winters. The night moved slowly. Mason cleaned the coffee machines, restocked the shelves, and helped the occasional customer buying last-minute snacks or party supplies. Around 10:30 p.m., he noticed a minivan pulling into Pump 7, moving unusually slow. Through the store window, Mason watched as a man in a thin jacket stepped out, carrying a sleeping child wrapped in a blanket. A woman in the passenger seat held 2 more children, all huddled together for warmth. The man walked into the store, his face worried. "Excuse me, we're in a bit of trouble. Our car's almost out of gas, and we're still 2 hours from home. The card reader at the pump isn't working, and all the banks are closed." Mason could see the fear in the man's eyes. The sleeping child in his arms couldn't have been more than 4 years old. "We were at my mother's house for the holidays," the man continued. "She's sick and we stayed longer than planned. I thought we had enough gas, but this cold weather, I didn't realize how much fuel we'd use." Mason walked to the window and looked at the minivan. The woman was trying to comfort their other children, who were crying from the cold. The vehicle's fuel gauge showed empty, and the temperature outside had dropped to 15 degrees below zero. The man's voice cracked slightly. "Is there any way you could process a card payment inside? We can't get cash until the bank's open, but we can't stay here all night with the kids." Mason felt the $50 bill in his pocket. It was his food money for the next 5 days. He thought about his own empty apartment and the long walk home in the cold after his shift. "How far do you need to go?" Mason asked. "About 2 hours north, to Duluth. Maybe 100 miles. Mason did some quick math. Gas prices were high, but $50 would get them home safely. Without hesitation, he pulled out his last bill. "Let me help you fill up. It's too cold for the kids to be stranded." The man's eyes widened. "We can't take your money. There must be another way." "Please," Mason said. "I have a little sister about their age. I want someone to help if it was her." After filling their tank, Mason even made them hot chocolate from the store machine, using his employee discount. The children's faces lit up as they sipped the warm drinks, their parents overwhelmed with gratitude. "And David Parker," the man said, his voice thick with emotion. "My wife Sarah, and our kids. We won't forget this. Please, take our number. We'll send you the money as soon as the bank's open." Mason smiled and waved them off. "Just get your family home safe. That's all I need." As the minivan pulled away from Pump 7, Mason watched until its tail lights disappeared into the night. His wallet was empty now, but his heart felt full. He had no idea that this moment of kindness would soon change everything. The next few days were harder than Mason had expected. He worked his regular shifts at the gas station, trying to ignore his growing hunger. The instant noodles at home were gone by January 2nd, and his next paycheck wasn't due until January 5th. During his shift on January 3rd, Mason kept himself busy cleaning the store. The winter weather had brought in lots of slush and dirt from customers' boots. As he mopped the floor, his manager Steve walked in. "Mason, you've been quiet since New Year's Eve," Steve said, checking the store inventory. "Everything okay?" Mason nodded, not wanting to mention his empty wallet or empty stomach. "Just tired, that's all." The afternoon dragged on slowly. Mason helped customers, restocked shelves, and tried to keep warm in the poorly heated store. Around 4:30 p.m., he was organizing the coffee cups when a black limousine pulled into the parking lot. At first, Mason thought he was seeing things. The sleek vehicle parked right at Pump 7, the same spot where he had helped the stranded family. A well-dressed man in his 60s stepped out and walked into the store. "Are you Mason?" the man asked, his voice warm but professional. "The young man who helped a family with 3 children on New Year's Eve?" Mason's heart started beating faster. "Yes, that's me. Are they okay?" The man smiled. "They're more than okay, thanks to you. I'm Richard Parker, David's father. He told me what you did for my grandchildren that night." Mason remembered David mentioning they had been visiting a sick relative. He hadn't expected it to be someone who owned a limousine. "My daughter-in-law Sarah called me in tears," Richard continued. "She told me how you spent your last $50 to help them get home. How you knew you wouldn't be able to eat properly until your next paycheck." Mason felt his face grow warm. "They needed it more than I did." Richard pulled out an envelope. "I own several car dealerships across the state. David helps me run the business. When they told me about your kindness, I had to come meet you myself." He handed Mason the envelope. "Inside you'll find a job offer. We need someone with your character at our main dealership in Minneapolis. The starting salary is $48,000 a year with full benefits. There's also a check to cover your $50, plus a small bonus to thank you for protecting my family." Mason's hands trembled as he held the envelope. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it," Richard replied. "We need people like you, Mason. People who help others, even when they have nothing to give. David and Sarah told me you didn't even hesitate." Mason looked at the envelope, thinking about his tiny apartment and the constant struggle to make ends meet. "I would be honored, Mr. Parker." "Call me Richard," the older man smiled. "Can you start next Monday? David will show you everything you need to know," Jason said. As Richard walked back to his car, Mason opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000 and employment paperwork for Parker Motors. His act of kindness had led to something he never expected, a real chance at a better life. Mason gave his 2 weeks' notice at the gas station the next morning. Steve wasn't surprised to hear he was leaving. "You deserve better than night shifts and minimum wage, kid," his manager said, patting him on the back. That weekend, Mason used a small portion of the money to buy proper business clothes for his new job. He found affordable but professional attire at a local department store, 2 pairs of black slacks, 3 dress shirts, and a warm winter coat on sale. Monday morning arrived with fresh snow. Mason took the bus to Parker Motors, arriving 30 minutes early. The dealership was much bigger than he had imagined, with rows of cars gleaming under the winter sun. "Dear Hector." David Parker met him at the entrance, greeting him with a warm handshake. "Welcome to the team, Mason. Let me show you around." As they walked through the dealership, David introduced Mason to his new colleagues. The office was modern but comfortable, nothing overly luxurious. They stopped at a desk near the sales floor. "This will be your workspace," David explained. "We'll start you in customer service. Your experience dealing with people at the gas station will be valuable here." Mason sat down at his new desk, still trying to process how much his life had changed in just a few days. A young woman named Rachel from HR spent the morning helping him with paperwork and explaining his benefits package. "You'll have health insurance starting next month," Rachel explained. "And you can join our 401k program after 90 days. We also have paid vacation time." During lunch break, David invited Mason to eat with him in the break room. Several other employees were there, eating and chatting casually. It felt normal, comfortable. "My father told me something interesting," David said, unwrapping his sandwich. He said what impressed him most wasn't just that you helped us. It was that you didn't ask for anything in return. Not even our contact information. Mason stirred his coffee. Honestly, I was just thinking about your kids. The temperature that night was dangerous. A sales manager named Tom joined their conversation. That's exactly why we needed someone like you here. This business is all about taking care of people, not just selling cars. As the day progressed, Mason learned the basics of his new role. He would be handling customer inquiries, managing service appointments, and helping ensure client satisfaction. It was straightforward work, but it offered real opportunities for growth. At the end of his first day, David stopped by Mason's desk. "How are you feeling about everything?" "Grateful," Mason replied honestly. "But also determined to prove I belong here." "You already have," David smiled. "By the way, Sarah and the kids want to have you over for dinner this weekend. No pressure, but they'd love to thank you properly." Mason nodded, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with his new winter coat. He had gone from struggling to survive to having a real future, all because he'd chosen kindness on a cold New Year's Eve. That Saturday evening, Mason took a bus to David and Sarah's house in a modest suburban neighborhood. He carried a small box of cookies from the local bakery, not wanting to arrive empty-handed. Sarah opened the door with a warm smile. "Mason, we're so glad you came." The three children peeked out from behind her, now fully awake unlike that cold night at the gas station. The house was cozy and lived in, with family photos on the walls and children's drawings on the refrigerator. The youngest child, Emma, age 4, immediately showed Mason her favorite stuffed bear. "This is the bear I was holding that night," she said softly. "Daddy said you gave us hot chocolate." The older children, twins Michael and Sophie, both 7, were more talkative. They sat next to Mason on the couch, asking him questions about working at the gas station. "Were you scared working there at night?" Michael asked. Mason smiled. "Sometimes, but helping people made it worth it." Sarah called everyone to dinner. The meal was simple but delicious. Homemade lasagna and garlic bread. As they ate, David shared stories about his early days working at his father's dealership. "I started in the service department washing cars," David explained. "Dad believed in learning the business from the ground up. Mason, he sees that same potential in you." Sarah reached for her husband's hand. "That night, we were so worried. The kids were cold, our phones were low on battery, and all the nearby motels were full because of New Year's Eve. We had passed 2 other gas stations before yours," David added. "Both were open, but nobody would help without a working card reader. Then we found you." Mason felt uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Sarah said quietly. "They wouldn't, we know, because they didn't." After dinner, the kids insisted on showing Mason their rooms. Sophie proudly displayed her science project about planets, while Michael showed off his collection of toy cars. "Dad says you're going to help sell real cars now," Michael said excitedly. "I'm starting in customer service first," Mason explained, "but maybe someday I'll learn to sell cars too." As the evening wound down, Sarah packed some leftover lasagna in a container for Mason to take home. The gesture reminded him of his own mother, who had passed away years ago. "You're welcome here any time," Sarah said as Mason prepared to leave. "We have family dinners every Saturday," Sarah said to Mason. David nodded in agreement. "You're part of our extended family now, Mason. What you did that night, it wasn't just about the money. You showed our children what real kindness looks like." Aye. On the bus ride home, Mason held the warm container of lasagna and thought about family. He had been alone for so long, focusing only on survival. Now, because of one decision on a cold night, he had not just a new job, but people who cared about him. 6 months passed quickly at Parker Motors. Mason excelled in his customer service role, earning the respect of his colleagues and customers alike. His natural empathy and willingness to help others made him a valuable team member. One morning, Richard Parker called Mason into his office. The room was simple but professional, with a desk and a few family photos on the wall. "Mason, take a seat," Richard said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "I've been reviewing your performance reports." Mason sat down, straightening his tie nervously. Richard smiled, putting him at ease. "Every customer you've helped has given you positive feedback," Richard continued. "David tells me you've stayed late multiple times to help clients with emergency situations." "I just try to treat people the way I wanted to be treated when I was struggling," Mason replied honestly. Richard nodded. "That's exactly why I wanted to talk to you. We're opening a new dealership location in St. Paul next month. We need someone to head their customer service department. David recommended you for the position." Mason's eyes widened. "Sir, I've only been here 6 months. And in those 6 months, you've shown more integrity and leadership than many people do in years," Richard said. "The position comes with a significant raise and the opportunity to build your own team." Mason thought about how far he had come from that cold night at the gas station. He now had a comfortable apartment, a savings account, and regular Saturday dinners with David's family. The struggle of living paycheck to paycheck felt like a distant memory. "Thank you, sir. I would be honored to accept the position." "Good," Richard smiled. "But please, I've told you before, call me Richard. You're family now." That evening, Mason walked through his old neighborhood. The corner stop gas station was still there, with its flickering lights and old fuel pumps. Steve was behind the counter, just like old times. "Mason," Steve called out warmly. "Look at you, all dressed up in a suit." Mason chatted with his former manager, sharing news about his promotion. As they talked, a young woman walked in, looking worried. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "My car's out of gas, and I left my wallet at home. I live 20 minutes away." Without hesitation, Mason pulled out his wallet. "Which pump are you at?" Steve watched with a knowing smile as Mason helped the stranded driver. Some things hadn't changed, even if Mason's circumstances had. Later that night, Mason sat in his apartment, looking at a framed photo on his wall. It showed him with David's family at their Easter dinner 2 months ago, the children's faces bright with laughter. Below it was his original name tag from the gas station, a reminder of where his journey began. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Don't forget, Emma's birthday party next Saturday. She insists her Uncle Mason must be there." Mason smiled, feeling grateful for how one act of kindness had transformed not just his career, but his entire life. He had found more than success. He had found the family. Love this story? Tap that like button and subscribe to Mystic Tales for more. Let us know how this story made you feel with a single word in the comments.